Hi, I'm Jane Farnham from Great British Speakers, and I'm here today chatting to the speaker, mentor, entrepreneur, and life coach, Sam Jones. He's a very busy man. Hi, Sam. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me, Jane.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, as a quick introduction, Sam specialises in millennials and Gen Z employees in the workplace, covering a range of highly relevant subjects such as confidence, leadership, and mental health. So before we get on to keynote speaking, Sam, just tell me a little bit about your earlier life and background. We know that we're both from Cardiff. That was a lovely surprise. So tell me a little bit about growing up there.
Yeah, it was a really good upbringing. Like, I come from like a nice middle-class, normal, typical background, really. Had a great upbringing. Came over to London, where I'm at now, in my early 20s, and knew I wanted to do something a little bit outside of the ordinary, the typical career path, which is now super normal for like the millennial Gen Z generation. But it was, way left field when I started. Like, my parents like, what are you doing? Why aren't you going down like a normal graduate scheme? Those sorts of things. And yeah, I started speaking, and my keynote speaking actually started I wouldn't even describe it as keynote speaking. It was doing an event on meetup.com in front of like 3 or 4 people on top of a pub for free. So that's where I sort of crafted my coaching qualifications and all those different things that I did. But actually all speaking and those sorts of things started from just free events that I did. And I built up big communities of young people. We had about 8,000 in our group at the end. And we had events of 120 odd young people there that I would give free talks to. And it gradually grew and grew and grew. And that's how I then stumbled into keynote speaking.
So you started as a bit of a life coach and mentor prior to that?
Yeah, I trained in my life coach and did a lot of training. Then you start initially with your clients, and then gradually, slowly but surely grew a reputation. Because I've been doing it 10 years now, and many clients later. I'm sort of here now. So.
Oh, super. Now, we saw some figures recently which said that this was the first time we've had 5 distinct generations in the workplace simultaneously. Now, what do you feel are the hazards, but also what are the opportunities for employees and the employers during this rather bizarre time?
Yeah, it's funny because when these like articles come out about like the 5 generations being there, these facts, they're often painted quite negatively, like it's something to be feared, to be worried about, and almost like tension around it. When really there's a lot of opportunities there, and it's also never as bad. Like, any of the challenges are never as bad as like these articles and media would portray. It's actually really good that the key things that happen like across like generationally, so from say millennials to Gen Xers or the silent generation going even further back, it's often to do with their preferences, it's to do with their expectations. And it also comes down to some core things like your values generally tend to be slightly different. But this doesn't happen just generationally. This is also with an age group thing. So, for example, you'd have on a Thursday night in your early 20s in London, it's most likely if you're in your 20s, you're going to be going out for a drink after. That tends to differ when you get a bit older, when you say in your 30s or 40s, when you have other responsibilities. So those things are kind of normal, and we've just got to be aware of those things. But the preferences that are different, that are really important, or the values that are different, that are really important, is younger people typically want more meaning, they want more autonomy, they want more freedom, they want those sorts of things to happen, and they want to climb the ladder really, really, really fast, which for a lot of the other generations, that you've got to work hard, gradually get there, and not everything's like granted to you, that can cause some clashes. And employers need to be aware of that. And they've also got to see the opportunities within having 5 generations. That means you have 5 like varying, like different values and preferences and skill sets that you can all take from each other. Like mobile phones, for example, you can have your young talent really teaching and leading the way in what apps we should use, what communications are the best right now. Because a lot of technology we used 10 years ago with mobiles and those sorts of things, they're dinosaur apps now. They're dinosaur things that we used to use. So we can use each other for that. Employers and good leaders will always do that. They'll draw the best out of them.
So there's positives and there's negatives, but I suppose it's about communication, isn't it? And taking the best of every generation and trying to get people all on the same page, thinking the same, which is tricky in itself, I suppose.
Yeah, and that comes down to, as always, good leaders. There's no such bad things as like having lots of different generations working within the same team or within your wider organization. There's nothing ever wrong with that. It always comes down to the leaders there, the managers, and understanding that and then utilizing the strengths from it. As I said, there's different preferences, there's different expectations, but you'll have that intergenerationally as well. You'll have that within a load of 20-somethings. With always, when I speak at organizations, I say it's good to know the data. It's good to know the general preferences of generations and what they typically do. But there's lots of outliers and there's lots of differences within them. So you need good leaders to be able to recognize that and them as they're an individual and then manage accordingly. Otherwise, you're just applying things generally to people because you read it in an article.
Yeah, sweeping generalizations never really work, do they? Now, obviously, a few more mature people who may be watching this may think that young people are not really off their phone, they interact more. Do you think that's fair? And do you think mindsets are completely different between an older generation and a younger generation?
No, I don't think it's fair. I think there's some truth to it. I don't think it's fair because everyone is using their phones more because the world demands it. The working world demands it, and also socially it's demanded. Where our usage on our phones has gone up drastically, even over the last few years. Okay, and then you think about lockdown and COVID, it increased even more. That we become reliant on this digital thing in front of us. Where it differs a little bit, and where it's quite important between the generations is, almost like I said before, how the younger generation use their phones, because they're so familiar with it, especially Gen Z, they use the best ways and the most efficient ways to do things. But it's happening across the whole generations. And was the other side, you said the mindset of...
Yeah. Do you think it's changed I mean, obviously the mindsets between a more mature workforce would be different to a younger mindset. Do you think that could have some positives? I mean, how do you bring the positives out in that and not become so negative thinking that, oh my God, you're just thinking on completely different planes?
Yeah, well, a good thing in a Time magazine, across a lot of magazines, every sort of new generation that comes out is released into the world. So millennials were the huge thing before, then Gen Z, and then all that happens. They always have an article, and it happens every few years, where it's like, this generation is like the wasted generation and the worst generation, and look how bad it is. It's not a generational thing, it's an age thing. And we've all got to be honest with ourselves. I look at it now and I look at these young TikTokers and I'm like, what are they doing? Like all these stupid dances. Because we all look and do that. And we tend to look back on our generation was the best, or our time was the best, and look what these are doing, all of that. So there's the natural propensity to be negative about the next or the following generations after you. We've got to get rid of that. It's just different value sets and preferences, okay, as I said before. So the positives we've got to see is, I try and encourage teams and companies to view people as individuals, and then whoever are the leaders in that team, and it doesn't necessarily mean bureaucratically the leaders, but everyone's a leader at every sort of level, is how are they interacting with people, how are they communicating with people to get the best out of each other? Because you're all working towards a common goal, whether it's a team objective or you want to have a great working environment or whatever it might be. So you've always got to draw those out, but it starts with the leaders within the team, because there's always something negative you can find out about any generation or individual,
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I think I call me old school, but I tend to think it comes down to attitude. If you've got the right attitude, you could be a more mature employee and a younger employee, but you've got the right attitude to work and the propensity to work hard, then, you can all come together regardless of your generation, really. Now, the last 2 years have been really tough. So how is the post-lockdown shift to working from home affecting younger people in general, really? Obviously, we've got a mental health aspect to it. But do you think it's harder on a practical level to progress your career when you're working from home and when you're remote and when there's less face-to-face interaction?
Yeah, it's a really complex subject that I've been a lot closer to the last, obviously, year and a half and 2 years with either group work or my individual clients as well. The ONS, like, they do really good data on sort of like anxiety and life satisfaction within the community, and all of that dipped massively at the start of COVID, and especially the first 6 months of COVID, dipped drastically. So it's all there. And where it's at now, and from both seeing it with individuals, so on the ground and within groups, and a lot of the data suggesting this, is now that the restrictions have gone generally, and we don't have this sort of COVID anxiety and this unfamiliarity and uncertainty. People have adapted quite well, and they're really enjoying the freedoms of being able to work from home, being able to go to the doctors, say, easier, or go to the gym at their lunch a lot easier, those sorts of things. So that's helping a lot more, especially for the younger generations. But subjectively, I've noticed it with clients from all different walks of life, all different age groups, all things like that. Where the challenge is and I've had a few conversations very recently with clients, is career progression now. So a lot of career progression is about, being proactive, like standing out from the crowd, being proactive, going beyond just the job. And a lot of people, because they're at home, have fallen into home comforts within their work, where they're just doing what they need to do to sort of get by and then live their life. Now, nothing wrong with that, but also if you have any level of ambition, you want to climb the ladder and those sorts of things, you have to go beyond the way you have to get in front of people. You have to communicate human to human instead of, always being on Zoom or always, via email. So that's a challenge for a lot of people right now. And one thing I'm encouraging people to do is to not lose that. Just because you're working from home, don't become isolated, don't become an island, because it's very easy to think you're connecting just by email and those sorts of things, but you need to get out there and you need to continue to do the things that allow your career to grow. And that requires proactivity, definitely.
Okay, now we've also recently heard about the Great Resignation, which a few of our mature speakers have been talking about. We've actually seen some figures that tell us up to 30% of people handing in their notice don't have another job to go to. So I'm interested in your perspective as a younger person, chatting to people working their way up the career ladder, on what you think about the Great Resignation, and what are they doing when they're handing in their notice in, and what are their plans if they don't have another job to go to?
Yeah, it's a bit of the great naivety, I think, with the younger generation, right? So there's a few things, and I was a product of this, so I can really speak to this from my own personal experience and on what I see with individual clients as well. There is a naivety about it's just going to figure itself out, which can be a good thing because it takes away some of that fear or the perceived risk of not having something, things that you think about, as you progress through your career, like pensions, skill sets that are easily transferable, those sorts of things. That's good, the naivety, and it's also positive that you're not getting people stuck in something that draws away from their soul. But there's a bit of a balance here that's really important from a coaching perspective. Is you want to encourage, like me especially, I want to encourage all my clients and anyone that you meet, your friends and your family, to follow their dreams, follow their hearts. But you can't just blindly do that. And then you sort of wake up in your early 30s when you have other values in your life. Say you want to, start a family, or you started a family, or you want to buy a house, which is increasingly difficult, but you haven't got solid foundations. You're unstable in that area of your life, financially or career-wise, whatever it might be. So it's important that this resignation is positive, that people aren't just staying in, like they're not being lifers in something that they really enjoy. Like my dad went from 16 to retirement in a company. Now it's only you typically get grads in big sort of consultancy firms that tend to do that typically, and they're well rewarded and kept within that. So it's good that they're able to try different things and move to different jobs. But you also, when you're following your dreams or trying to fulfill something, you also have to equally look at where's the stability going to come from, and when does this cut off? When do you stop jumping from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing? Because you're not always going to land on this incredible, perfect career that people are expecting or idolizing at the younger generations. Perfect is not out there. It's often about finding something that matches your skills, matches your values, something that is difficult, but it's worth the effort, in order to get there, because that's fulfillment,
Yeah, that hard work. Now, you've worked with some very large organizations like Unilever, P&G, ASOS, and News UK. Do you have any specific examples where you've spoken and you feel people have moved forward as a result of your involvement, your talk?
Yeah, 100%. For me, it's all about speaking. It's all about practical things. I also like to challenge myself, like, and do live coaching in talks, because it's very easy for me to, even now, like I'm sitting here talking about these things, saying, this is what you should do, this is the way to do things. It's easy to do that because it's just talk. I think coaching, and for me, what workshops should be, is they should be a movement from point A, as in like, we want to build more confidence in the workplace, within ourselves and within our workplace. And then point B, which is, now I can express myself more. Now I want to speak up in a meeting. Now I'm going to set that meeting with my boss to talk to him about my career. Like, those things are very actionable. So yeah, I do a lot of live coaching with individuals or within groups, within workshops. And it's always got to be focused on practicalities, because it's all very well learning the theory of confidence, for example, like how confidence works. But unless you can take tools and then apply it within that 45 minutes, hour, few hours that we're in the keynote of the workshop, and then take it away. And I just did work with the council a few weeks ago, and we had 2 sessions. We had one week, and then 2 weeks later we did the others, and they had specific exercise and challenges to do. And it was amazing what happened. People were like, someone climbed a mountain, say a mountain, it's like, you know, within the UK. So it's like 1,000 meters. So it's still pretty good, like for me. Yeah. But things, as I said, set up meetings with boss, spoke up in a meeting. So yeah, because none of this, you can learn everything you can. And that's one of the problems with the younger generations at the moment, is they've got a lot of information out there, all the YouTube videos you can ever want to learn things. But the big difference in the people that really get further quicker, at least, is that they're applying those things. So I really take it as a challenge for me when I'm working with individuals that they're applying stuff, because otherwise you're only getting half of the answer, you know?
And what's a challenge to one person, like, you know, climbing a mountain, or, you know, is equally a challenge to other people, like just putting their hands up in a meeting, as you said, because some people just don't know how to do that. They don't have the confidence to do that. So those are real tangible skills that people can learn. Now, obviously, I can feel your passion about talking, but what gives you the biggest buzz about speaking to audiences, live audiences?
You know, it's probably, as I said, I really like putting myself under good pressure. Like, people don't like pressure, but I see pressure mostly as a really good thing, because you tend to respond like, and speaking is that real raw thing where you're in front of a group of people that often, with me at least, don't know me. I'm sure some of you speakers, like, they know them straight away, but for me, they don't know me. And they're like, why should I listen to this individual? And I see that as a really good challenge, and I get a real buzz out of that, because for me, it's then that idea of everyone here is at point A, like, as in they want to improve something that they can't quite do right now. How can I help move them to point B? And as much as you can, like with speaking, you know, you plan what, you know, your structure of what you want to teach and learn. There's loads of different variations in that can happen. Like, you know, someone might ask a certain question, or it takes you in a certain direction or whatever. And that for me gives me a massive, massive buzz, because you've got that most of the time, you've got 45 minutes to an hour. People sometimes it'll be longer, but yeah, I really get a buzz out of that. That to me is what's worth some of, like, you know, when people don't want to public speak or whatever because they're nervous. Like, I love all of that. I think it's great. But yeah, that's probably it. That's a good. I haven't really thought about that for a while, actually. That's probably the thing.
I can really feel your passion for what you do, and I'm sure that all your audience have some real key, valuable takeaways. So thank you so much for chatting to us today. It's been absolutely lovely. And if you would like some mentoring, coaching, or just a fabulous keynote speech to sort of engage your staff and give them lots of sort of positive keynote messages to take away with them, then just pick up the phone to book Sam. Call myself or Steve at Great British Speakers on 01753 439 289, or you can email bookings@greatbritishtalent.com. Sam, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jay.